Marcus Vale checked his chronometer for the third time in 10 minutes, suppressing the urge to bang his head against the transport ship's console. 3 hours into what should have been a routine passenger run to Thessera, and his alien charge had already managed to question every safety protocol, criticize the ship's outdated design, and make at least a dozen disparaging comments about human competence. "This vessel is positively archaic," Zara Nethys declared from where she lounged in the co-pilot seat, her iridescent blue skin shimmering under the ship's lighting. Her elongated limbs were draped with casual arrogance across the armrests, and her silver-white hair fell in perfect waves to her shoulders. "My family's personal craft could complete this journey in half the time." "Then you should have taken your family's personal craft," Marcus muttered, his weathered hands steady on the controls despite his irritation. At 35, he'd seen enough of the galaxy to know that wealth and arrogance often went hand in hand, regardless of species. "What was that?" Her voice carried the sharp edge of someone unaccustomed to being anything less than the center of attention. "Nothing, Lady Nethys." Marcus straightened, his pilot's training from his engineering days in the transport corps keeping his voice neutral. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable in the passenger cabin. The entertainment system has a full library of Vorthak literature." Zara's laugh was like wind chimes in a hurricane, melodic but somehow grating. "I've already reviewed your pathetic collection. Human curators have such limited appreciation for sophisticated art." She gestured dismissively with one elegant hand, the gesture somehow managing to encompass not just Marcus but his entire species. Marcus bit back his response. 2 more days to Thessera, then he could deliver this spoiled diplomat's daughter to whatever arranged marriage awaited her and get back to cargo runs. No more passengers, especially not ones who looked at him like he was something they'd scrape off their boot. The irony wasn't lost on him that someone so beautiful could be so thoroughly unpleasant. Zara's alien features were undeniably striking, the subtle ridges along her temples that marked her as Vorthak nobility, the way her large violet eyes seemed to catch every reflection, the graceful way she moved despite her constant complaints. If she weren't so insufferably entitled, she might even be attractive. "How much longer until we reach the surface?" Zara asked, rising from her seat to pace the small cockpit. Her form-fitting travel suit, clearly expensive, hugged her tall, willowy frame as she moved. "Still 18 hours, Marcus replied, the same answer he'd given 20 minutes ago. "Just like the last time I asked, yes." She waved him off impatiently. "This journey is intolerable. On Vorthak Prime, our transport systems utilize quantum tunneling to reduce travel time by—" "We're not on Vorthak Prime," Marcus interrupted, his patience finally fraying. "We're using human technology to get you safely to your destination. If that's not up to your standards, you're welcome to file a complaint with the Transport Guild when we arrive." Zara's violet eyes narrowed dangerously. "You forget yourself, human. I am the daughter of Ambassador Krenth Nethys, first voice of the Vorthak Diplomatic Corps. A word from me could end your little shipping operation permanently." Marcus turned in his seat to face her fully, his brown eyes steady and unimpressed. "And you forget that we're currently in the middle of nowhere, Lady Nethys. Out here, your daddy's influence is worth exactly as much as mine, nothing. What matters is getting to Thessera in one piece." The tension in the cockpit was thick enough to cut when the proximity alarms began chiming. Marcus immediately turned back to his controls, his irritation forgotten as training took over. The jungle planet Thessera filled the view screen, its surface a riot of green vegetation beneath swirling cloud cover. "Beginning atmospheric entry," he announced, his hands moving with practiced efficiency across the control panel. "Secure yourself in the passenger cabin. The descent can be rough." "I prefer to observe the landing process," Zara said, settling back into the co-pilot's seat despite his instruction. "Vorthak pilots utilize a much more elegant approach vector." Marcus decided not to waste breath arguing. The ship shuddered as it hit the upper atmosphere, and he focused on navigating the thermal currents that made Thessera notorious among pilots. The planet's 3 moons created unusual gravitational effects, and the thick jungle canopy made finding suitable landing sites challenging. "There," he said, indicating a clearing on the scanner. "Research Station Beta 7. They'll have the supplies we need and a place for you to rest before we continue to the capital." The transport touched down with only minor jolting, and Marcus began the post-flight checklist. Zara was already moving toward the exit hatch, apparently eager to escape the confines of his archaic ship. "Wait," Marcus called, grabbing 2 environment suits from the storage locker. "You'll need this." Zara examined the offered suit with obvious distaste. "This is hideous. And it smells like human perspiration." "It's clean," Marcus assured her, already climbing into his own suit. "And it'll keep you alive." Thessara's jungle contains some of the most aggressive fauna in this sector. The Thessaran spineworms alone. "Spare me your human paranoia," Zara interrupted, tossing the suit aside. "The Vorthak evolved on a world far more dangerous than this primitive jungle. Our natural immunities make us resistant to most alien pathogens and toxins." Marcus sighed, sealing his helmet. "Your funeral, princess." "I am not a princess," she snapped, though her regal bearing suggested otherwise. "And I refuse to be seen in that ridiculous costume. We're simply walking to the research station, correct? How dangerous could it possibly be?" The hatch cycled open with a soft hiss, releasing a wave of humid, oxygen-rich air that immediately fogged Marcus's visor. He activated the suit's environmental controls and stepped out onto Thessara's surface. The jungle pressed close on all sides, a wall of emerald vegetation punctuated by massive trees that stretched toward the canopy far overhead. Somewhere in the distance, native creatures called to each other with haunting cries. Zara emerged behind him, her violet eyes wide with what might have been wonder as she took in the alien landscape. "It's actually quite beautiful," she admitted, her usual arrogance momentarily forgotten. "Beautiful and deadly," Marcus reminded her, checking his scanner for the path to the research station. "Stay close and don't touch anything. The local flora has adapted to prey on creatures much smaller than a Vorthak," Zara finished dismissively. She strode confidently toward the tree-line, her head held high. Marcus watched her go with growing exasperation and something that might have been concern. For all her arrogance, she was his responsibility until he delivered her safely to Thessara's capital. And despite her insufferable attitude, he found himself hoping she was right about Vorthak immunity. He was about to find out just how wrong she could be. The Thessaran spineworm had struck with lightning speed, its barbed tendrils wrapping around Zara's leg before Marcus could even shout a warning. By the time he blasted the creature with his pulse rifle and carried her back to the ship, the alien toxins were already coursing through her system, turning her normally luminous blue skin a sickly pale shade. Now, 6 hours later, Marcus knelt beside the medical cot where Zara writhed in fevered delirium. The ship's basic medical scanner showed her vital signs fluctuating wildly, her Vorthak physiology fighting a battle against compounds it had never encountered. "Father, please." She whimpered, her silver-white hair plastered to her forehead with perspiration that seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly quality. "I tried to be perfect, like Valex, like Theron." Marcus dampened a cloth with cool water and gently wiped her burning skin. Her brothers, he assumed, she'd mentioned them during one of her earlier complaints about human inadequacy. Even in delirium, she was trying to measure up to someone else's expectations. "Shoo," he murmured, surprising himself with the gentleness in his voice. "You're safe now." Her violet eyes snapped open, unfocused but searching. "Marcus?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "The worm, did it?" "Dead," he assured her. "You're going to be fine. The toxin is working its way through your system, but your Vorthak immunity is handling it." He hoped he sounded more confident than he felt. The medical database had precious little information about cross-species toxicology. Zara's hand found his, her fingers cold despite her fever. "I should have listened," she said, the admission seeming to cost her enormous effort. "You warned me about the suits." "Save your strength," Marcus replied, but he didn't pull his hand away. Her grip was surprisingly strong, as if he were the only anchor keeping her from drifting away entirely. Her eyes fluttered closed again, and she sank back into fevered dreams. Marcus found himself studying her face without her usual mask of arrogance. The sharp angles of her alien features seemed softer somehow, more vulnerable. The ridge markings along her temples, which he'd initially found off-putting, actually formed intricate patterns that were quite beautiful. When had he stopped seeing her as just an insufferable passenger? Not good enough, she murmured, tossing restlessly. Never good enough for the diplomatic corps, can't arrange words like poetry, can't negotiate like Valex. Marcus adjusted the cooling unit, directing more airflow over her burning skin. You don't have to be like anyone else, he said quietly, not sure if she could hear him. You just have to be yourself. In her dreams, Zara stood once again in her father's ornate office on Vortak Prime, the walls lined with holographic displays showing the family's diplomatic achievements spanning 3 centuries. Ambassador Krenth Nethys loomed behind his crystalline desk, his own ridge markings blazing with disapproval. Emotional outbursts during the Centauri negotiations, he intoned, his voice echoing with the formal cadence reserved for official censure. Inappropriate curiosity about human cultural practices. Failure to maintain proper diplomatic distance. I was trying to understand them, Dream Zara protested, feeling again the familiar crushing weight of disappointment. How can we negotiate effectively if we don't understand their motivations? Understanding is not your role, her father replied coldly. Compliance is your role. The arrangement with the House of Vex will proceed as planned. You will marry Corvain Vex and produce heirs suitable for diplomatic alliance. The dream shifted, and suddenly she was running through corridors that seemed to stretch endlessly, pursuing a figure that remained always just out of reach. But now the figure turned, and instead of her father or brothers, she saw Marcus, not in his utilitarian pilot's gear, but somehow more elemental, more real than the sanitized perfection of Vortak society. You don't have to run, Dream Marcus said, his brown eyes warm with something she'd never seen directed at her before, acceptance. You don't have to prove anything. But I'm not worthy, she whispered, the words torn from some deep place in her soul. I feel too much, question too much. I'm not perfect like they are. Perfect is overrated, he replied, reaching out to touch her face. Even in the dream, his human warmth was startling, so different from the cool detachment her people prized. I'd rather have someone real. Back in the waking world, Marcus felt Zara's fever spike again. Her breathing became shallow, rapid, and he made a quick decision. The research station was still hours away on foot, but they had emergency medical supplies designed for human physiology. He'd have to hope that some of them would work on Vortak biology. He found a broad-spectrum fever reducer and carefully calculated what he hoped was an appropriate dose for her larger frame. As he prepared the injection, Zara's eyes opened again, more lucid than before. You're taking care of me, she observed, wonder in her voice. It's what humans do, Marcus replied, checking the medical scanner one more time. We help each other. Even insufferable alien passengers who insult your technology and question your competence. Marcus paused, meeting her gaze. Especially them, apparently. A ghost of a smile crossed her lips. I've been horrible to you. You've been, challenging, he admitted diplomatically, administering the injection. But I'm starting to think there's more to you than the diplomatic mask. Zara was quiet for a long moment, studying his face with new intensity. In my fever dreams, she said finally, I saw you differently. Not as just a transport pilot, but as, someone who sees me. Really sees me, not what I'm supposed to be. Marcus felt something shift in his chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the ship's environmental systems. Maybe that's because I don't know what you're supposed to be. I only know what you are. And what am I? She asked, genuine curiosity replacing her usual superiority. He considered the question seriously. Stubborn. Proud. Sometimes insufferable. Her expression fell slightly, and he quickly continued. But also brave enough to walk into an alien jungle without protection because you believed in your own strength. Intelligent enough to see through diplomatic facades. And he hesitated, then plunged ahead, beautiful in a way that has nothing to do with politics or arrangements. Zara's violet eyes widened. Marcus. The ship's communication system chirped, interrupting the moment. Marcus reluctantly moved to answer it, recognizing the frequency from Research Station Beta 7. Transport Vessel Meridian, this is Dr. Yates at Beta 7. We received your distress signal. What's your status? Medical emergency, Marcus replied, glancing back at Zara. Thessarin spineworm toxin exposure. Patient is stabilizing but needs proper treatment. Copy that, Meridian. We have antivenom for local species. Can you make it to the station, or do you need extraction? Marcus checked the scanner readings again. Zara's fever was dropping, and her vital signs were strengthening. We can make it. ETA approximately 4 hours. Understood. Dr. Yates out. When he turned back to Zara, she was sitting up, her color returning to its normal luminous blue. The fever had broken, leaving her looking exhausted but alert. 4 hours, she said thoughtfully. And then we continue to the capital, where I'm expected to marry a Vorthak noble I've never met and pretend this never happened. Marcus sat down beside the cot, suddenly aware of how close they were. Is that what you want? What I want has never been particularly relevant, she replied, but her voice lacked its earlier bitter edge. I'm the daughter of an ambassador. My life was planned before I was born. That doesn't answer my question. Zara looked at him for a long moment, and Marcus saw a struggle playing out behind her violet eyes. What I want, she said slowly, is to understand what it feels like to choose. To feel something real instead of appropriate. To be with someone who sees Zara, not just the ambassador's daughter. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Marcus reached out, his human hand covering her alien one, marveling at how perfectly they seemed to fit together despite their differences. Then maybe, he said quietly, it's time you started choosing. Outside, Thessara's jungle called with its wild, dangerous songs. But inside their small ship, two beings from different worlds had found something worth more than safety, more than duty, more than the expectations of their respective societies. They had found each other. The electromagnetic storm struck just as they reached the halfway point to Research Station Beta 7. Marcus watched helplessly as his instruments went haywire, the ship's navigation system scrambling under the assault of Thessara's infamous atmospheric disturbances. Lightning crackled through the dense canopy above them, each bolt seeming to reach down like grasping fingers. How long will this last? Zara asked, her voice steadier now that the spineworm toxin had mostly cleared her system. She stood behind his pilot's seat, close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. Could be hours, could be days, Marcus replied grimly, powering down non-essential systems to prevent damage. These storms are unpredictable. The planet's 3 moons create gravitational anomalies that. A massive lightning strike illuminated the jungle around them like daylight, followed immediately by thunder that shook the ship's hull. Zara instinctively moved closer, her hand finding his shoulder for balance. Well, she said with forced lightness, at least we're not going anywhere. Marcus activated the ship's emergency protocols, sealing them in as the storm raged outside. The electromagnetic interference would make communication impossible until it passed, leaving them truly isolated in their small craft. He tried to ignore how aware he was of Zara's presence, of the subtle scent of her skin that reminded him of alien flowers. The medical scanner showed some unusual readings before the storm hit, he said, pulling up the data on a secondary display. Your hormone levels spiked dramatically after the toxin exposure. Zara moved away from him, suddenly tense. What kind of readings? Marcus studied the scrolling data, frowning. I'm not familiar with Vorthak physiology, but it looks like your reproductive system is active. The toxin might have triggered some kind of biological response. A flush of deeper blue spread across Zara's skin, visible even in the dim emergency lighting. Oh. That's problematic. Problematic how? Marcus turned to face her, noting how she seemed to be deliberately keeping distance between them now. Vortex biology is different from human, she said carefully. We don't experience constant reproductive readiness like your species. Instead, we have cycles triggered by specific biochemical responses. Usually to compatible mates. The implication hung in the air between them. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. Compatible mates? The toxin must have mimicked the chemical signatures, Zara said quickly, though her violet eyes suggested she didn't entirely believe her own explanation. It's purely biological. It doesn't mean anything. Another lightning strike, closer this time, sent shadows dancing across the cabin walls. The ship's lights flickered, and Marcus quickly switched to backup power. In the softer glow, Zara looked ethereal, almost luminous. What does it mean? He asked quietly. The cycle? Zara turned away, her elegant hands clasped behind her back. Heightened sensitivity. Increased emotional intensity. A biological drive to bond with the source of the trigger. She paused. It will pass once I'm away from the stimulus. The stimulus being me. The stimulus being proximity to a compatible genetic match, she corrected, but her voice lacked conviction. Marcus stood, moving toward her despite the voice in his head warning him to maintain distance. And if you don't want it to pass? She spun to face him, her eyes wide. Marcus, you don't understand. This isn't just attraction. For Vortex, this kind of biological bonding is sacred. Permanent. It's not something we enter into lightly. Maybe I don't want to enter into it lightly either. The word surprised them both. Marcus had spent years keeping people at arm's length after losing his crew in the transport accident that ended his military career. He'd told himself he preferred solitude, that caring too much led to too much pain. But something about Zara, her vulnerability beneath the arrogance, her strength in the face of danger, the way she looked at him like he was worth seeing, had broken through defenses he'd thought were impenetrable. You have a life to return to, Zara said, but she didn't move away when he stepped closer. A career, a future planned on human terms. And I have duties, obligations. My marriage to Corvain Vex was arranged to strengthen diplomatic ties between our houses. Do you love him? I've never met him. That's not what I asked. Zara's composure cracked slightly. Love isn't the point. Duty is the point. Service to my people is the point. What about service to yourself? Marcus was close enough now to see the flecks of silver in her violet eyes, to count the delicate ridges that marked her as Vortex nobility. What about choosing your own path? Easy words for someone who's never had the fate of diplomatic relations resting on their shoulders. You're right, Marcus admitted. I've never had that pressure. But I have had the weight of other people's lives in my hands. I've made choices that got good people killed because I followed orders instead of my instincts. The pain in his voice made Zara's expression soften. Your transport crew. 12 people under my command. The official inquiry said it was mechanical failure, unavoidable. But I knew that transport was overdue for maintenance. I should have grounded it, should have refused the mission. He ran a hand through his hair, the old guilt as fresh as ever. I learned that following orders isn't always the same as doing what's right. Thunder crashed overhead, and the ship's hull groaned under the storm's assault. In the confined space, they were forced together by circumstance and choice, two beings from different worlds trying to navigate feelings that transcended species. What are you suggesting? Zara asked, her voice barely audible over the storm. I'm suggesting that maybe, just maybe, we stop letting other people decide what our lives should look like. Zara stared at him for a long moment, conflict clear in her alien features. The biological bonding, if it completes, there's no going back. Vortex who experience it describe it as finding the other half of their soul. It's not casual, Marcus. It's forever. Would that be so terrible? The question hung between them like a challenge. Outside, the storm raged with primitive fury, but inside their small sanctuary, something equally powerful was building. Zara reached out slowly, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw with feather-light touches. "You feel so different," she whispered. "Warmer than us. Your emotions are so close to the surface." "Is that bad?" "It's terrifying," she admitted. "And wonderful. I've spent my whole life learning to suppress feeling, to be cool and diplomatic and perfect. But around you, I feel alive." Marcus caught her hand, pressing it flat against his chest where his heart hammered against his ribs. "You make me feel alive too. I thought I was done with that after the accident, thought I'd closed myself off permanently. But you. I'm impossible and arrogant and completely unsuitable for a human transport pilot," she finished with a shaky laugh. "You're beautiful and brave and you see the universe in ways I never imagined," he countered. "And maybe unsuitable is exactly what we both need." The ship shuddered as another lightning strike hit close by, and suddenly they were in each other's arms, drawn together by forces that went beyond the merely physical. Zara's skin was fever-warm against his, her alien scent intoxicating. When their lips met, it was with the desperate intensity of two people who knew they were crossing a line from which there might be no return. "Marcus," she breathed against his mouth, his name like a prayer. "I know," he replied, understanding without words. "I know what this means." As the storm raged outside, they held each other in the dim emergency lighting, two hearts beating in synchrony despite the differences in their bodies, their cultures, their worlds. The Vorthack biological bonding wasn't just chemistry, it was recognition, two souls calling to each other across the vast emptiness of space. "When the storm ends," Zara said eventually, her head resting against his shoulder, "everything will try to pull us apart. My father, your career, our entire societies. Then we'll have to be stronger than everything else," Marcus replied, his arms tightening around her. "Together." Outside, lightning continued to split the sky, but inside their storm-bound sanctuary, Zara Nephis and Marcus Vale had found something worth fighting for. The real storm, they both knew, would begin when they had to face the universe and tell it they were choosing love over duty, heart over obligation, each other over everything else their worlds expected of them. But that was tomorrow's battle. Tonight, they had each other, and the growing certainty that some bonds were strong enough to bridge any divide, even the space between stars. As the electromagnetic storm reached its peak, their own storm was just beginning, and it would reshape everything in its path. End of Part 3. The lovers are now bound by forces beyond their control, but the real test awaits when they must face their respective worlds and choose between duty and desire, obligation and love, the lives they were meant to live and the life they want to build together.